Welcome in, folks, to a big, important game day. We have been looking forward to this game for a very long time, and the day has finally arrived. I am Matt Scalisi, your host here on the Alabama Pregame Show, brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. And I am joined today by a highly experienced, highly intelligent gentleman who has worked with us many times here on AL.com, but he has worked with a lot of the players that you guys are going to be watching out there on the field today, and he's been a part of the Alabama program during his college career. This is Mac Hereford. Mac, first of all, uh, I'm thrilled to have you on the show. I do want to say our regular audience might be wondering today, hey, that's not Simone Eli. That's a good looking gentleman, but it is not Simone Eli. That's our friend Simone, who's normally the host of our pregame show, had a baby this week. So huge congrats to Simone. She and her baby and the family are doing great. So we're wishing them congratulations and best of luck. In the meantime, Mac, it's just up to you and me, schmucks here, to break down this game today.
Let's do it. I don't know if I can fill in, if I'll be a good sub or not, but I'm here.
Well,
I made it here.
you're technically replacing me, so it's not a very high standard that you have to beat today. You just have to have a little bit more uh, understanding of how Alabama can possibly win this game. And it seems, look, Mac, I've had the TV on all morning. I'm here in Atlanta. I'm not hearing anybody give Alabama any chance in this game. And we'll get into the individual matchups. But what do you think about that, Mac? What do you think about the general kind of national conversation that sort of so far is saying this game is it's we would be better off talking about Oklahoma State and Cincinnati. There's no reason to even talk about Bama right now.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Alabama struggled a lot this season. Has had different games that have been a little bit closer, whatnot. But the thing is, it's interesting. I like this what they're saying on the national television, and everyone I've heard is like it's an instant win. Georgia's going to dominate Alabama, but I think people are just counting out. You got Nick Saban, and he's playing one of his former coaching, like one of the members' former coaching staff, and you have to take that into account that he knows what Kirby Smart's going to do. He's been game planning, and Coach Saban said a little while back, like every team gives Alabama their best, but when has Alabama gotten a chance to really give a team their best in a sense? Because, they've all been, I feel like they always play down to the competition. So with Georgia and them being an underdog, I don't think it's right to count them out. I think that this is going to be a battle. And I'm really excited because I like that Alabama, it almost takes a little bit of the pressure off going into this game as an underdog, which you usually don't see for Alabama.
Now your time there, you guys were pretty much, you were there for the entirety of your career at Alabama. I don't think you guys were ever an underdog heading into the game. So is this how do you feel like internally the program will respond to this? Do you think they even sense that they're sort of being considered the the scrappy underdog in this game, or is that not noise that they would be aware of?
I think, a lot of times we hear this term called rat poison. We hear it all the
Sure.
time. And I know Coach Saban has definitely told the guys about that. But in this situation, it's interesting because for the most part, when I played there, it was always, you know, most of the time we were the top dog. So people were trying to say things. And a lot of times it'd be like silence and noise. But I think in a situation like this, it's actually beneficial. We can use that, guys are going to use that, and the coaching staff can use that to motivate this team and say, hey, look, like we're the underdog. People don't think we should win this game. And I think that, like I said, a lot of times we like to cancel the noise, but in this situation, I think it's going to be something that we use to, motivate those guys. And I think it's going to be something that takes a little bit of pressure off the guys, knowing that, like, okay, people don't believe in us. This is a chance, an opportunity for us to come out here and ball out and beat a team that no one else thinks we can beat.
Well, definitely going to be a challenge for Alabama. I'm sure it will be a challenge for Georgia too. They have notably, from a lot of folks have pointed out, that Georgia has not really played the best of the best in the SEC this year. They have been dominant, but they have not played a lot of the best teams in the rest of their conference this year because of how the schedule lined up. But let's get into some of the individual matchups that we think are going to be important today, Mac. And the first one I want to talk about, I think, is what a lot of folks would consider to be Alabama's weakest point on the team here, and that's Alabama's offensive line versus Georgia's defensive line, which a lot of folks would consider to be Georgia's strength. How do you, I mean, when you're going into a situation like this where there is what you would perceive to be a mismatch. I think even though Alabama has not been an underdog very much in recent years, they've had position mismatches before where they felt like they were at a disadvantage. How does Saban and his staff approach something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's constantly something people have talked about this year. The Alabama offensive line, being a weakness for this team. And last game was not a great performance. There was like 11, I think, 11 tackles for loss, and around 7 sacks on Bryce Young. And the run game couldn't really get going. It's tough. I think that Coach Saban obviously wants these guys to, do their job, and he's trying everything he can to fix this. But I would like to say that I also think it's a lot bigger than just the offensive line. And I've talked about this before, but you have the offensive line, but you got to think about the timing. How long do they need to hold, these guys up? And that depends on the receivers running the correct routes, like
Sure.
running the routes in a timely manner. Bryce Young getting the correct reads in the amount of time he has to get. So a lot of things go into it besides just the offensive line unit. But I can tell you that Coach Saban is probably giving these guys heck all week. He's probably having, maybe even putting some extra defenders out there on the defensive line to try to prepare them and do everything he can possible to get this unit ready for this game.
And that's an interesting point you bring up about the receivers and the rest of the offense kind of having an effect on how good the offensive line even needs to be, or how long they need to hold their blocks. I mean, we'll get into that part of it in a little bit here, but I think that's when we're talking about other matchups out there to watch for today. You know, it's been an issue for the Alabama offensive line. We especially saw it last week, and who knows how much of an effect individually this had. But when Jamison Williams was out of the game, which was for most of that game against Auburn, Alabama's offensive line really did seem to have probably their hardest time of the year, and I wonder how much of an effect that had on them and their performance in that game. Is that there was there was a guy who normally is able to create separation pretty quickly, and he wasn't out there.
Yeah, and I saw something about that like the other day when I was looking at this stuff for the game, but it's like it's massive. We need all the receivers and guys ready, and we're going to talk about this obviously a little bit later on, but it's key for the Alabama offensive line to hold up and to present, like is a good balanced offense, because we don't want to be one dimensional. I think that's where if we lose, if Georgia's able to stop the run and we have to rely completely on the pass, it's just not going to work for us. And so these guys have got to be ready. And I think Coach Saban has probably done everything he possibly can to prepare these guys. I think preparation is just massive. That people can't comprehend how much Alabama prepares for games like this, but as much as also Saban just studying and coming up with game plan for these guys and ability to get them to be successful doing their job.
For sure. And let's flip it to the other side, Mac, and talk about the Alabama defensive line versus Georgia's OL. Now, I will admit I have not seen as much of Georgia's offense this year as I have their defense, mostly just because it's not what you get shown in the highlight reels. Alabama's defensive line, coming off of arguably its best performance of the entire season. I think Georgia's offensive line is certainly going to be expected to be a tougher challenge than Auburn's was, but it's an offense overall for Georgia that I think it's safe to say this is not an explosive offense. This is not an offense that has been overwhelming teams by scoring super quickly and having all these unstoppable weapons. It's a good offense, but it is probably not the most explosive most difficult to defend offense that Alabama has faced this year.
Yeah, and I think too, it's like you look at their previous games, previous matchups, they haven't really been challenged. And you're going up against an Alabama defensive unit. You got Will Anderson, who's got some Heisman hype going, probably one of the best, if not the best, outside linebacker defensive end that Alabama's, ever had, arguably. And, Alabama's led the SEC in sacks this year. And so, like, you think about those things, Georgia hasn't been faced with that kind of defense. So I think Alabama's going to pressure Stetson Bennett. And then I think you talk about, okay, has Stetson Bennett been pressured this year? Not really. So you bring in, this is a big matchup because if these guys are able to be successful and do their job, it's going to cause a lot of problems for that Georgia offense that, like you said, hasn't necessarily been explosive. And so it'll be interesting to see. But I think this defensive line unit is going to be ready, and I'm looking forward to that matchup for sure.
Yeah, when Will Anderson obviously is the guy that gets the headlines, Mac. But when you look at the rest of the unit, who are some other guys, I guess, in that front seven that have jumped out to you that are worth keeping an eye on, or that could possibly step up and be a guy to make a huge play today for that group?
Yeah, I think Byron Young for sure, but also a guy I love that I think is really underrated is Phil Mathis. I remember, during my time at Alabama, he was, I think, like my senior year, he was just starting to make it out there, get big. And I remember this side note, but his parents, I think, had buttons that said "Make him fill it," which I think is pretty clever. But he's a guy who's fast, explosive, and I think that, like I said, he's underrated. Same with Byron Young. Both of those guys are just athletic guys. I think everyone talks about Will Anderson, which he's a lot, you should be talking about him, but those are two guys that I can't wait to see today, and I think will have a big impact, and I think we'll see something, they'll create a spark for sure.
All right, and certainly, we talked about Will Anderson's Heisman hype. There is a guy going into this game today who a lot of people consider potentially the front runner for the Heisman. Obviously, today is going to matter. It's going to make a big difference. But Bryce Young is entering the game today, less than 100 yards away from a 4,000-yard season passing. He's got 40 touchdowns through the air, only 4 interceptions, a crazy ratio for touchdowns to interceptions. I mean, this guy, I think there's been plenty of praise for him. I think Alabama fans have loved what they've seen from him this year. Honestly, Matt, in some ways, I think he is still not getting the credit that he deserves when you look at his stat line. I think a lot of people remember every individual mistake and 3 and out and sack that he takes, and they're in the process of that, you're losing the fact that the amount of production this guy has amassed is almost unprecedented. I think people don't think of him on the same level as a Mac Jones or a Tua Tagovailoa, but the numbers kind of say otherwise. Like production wise, he's absolutely up there so far.
Yeah, I'm looking at the numbers right here you have up on the screen, and it's, 40 touchdowns with only 4 interceptions. 4 interceptions is pretty phenomenal. I think I've wondered about that. I'm like, how does this guy not get more praise? Like, I watch the games, and I played with some of those guys, Mac, Tua, Jalen, and all those guys at some point got a lot of praise. I think it's a lot about the fact that it's just the team this year. He's a young guy, and people are relying on him, trying to get him to be just, they want him to be this guy who's going to take over the game, like a Michael Jordan like character for this Alabama team. And it's like this, we don't necessarily have all the weapons. We don't have the offensive line that we've had in the past. And so you can't really put that much pressure on him. But he's also, like you said, put up the numbers. He's done really well. He deserves more praise. One thing I love watching about Bryce Young is just his composure. Like, that's one of my favorite things about a lot of the quarterbacks at Alabama. But it's almost like this like Jalen Hurts type composure that I remember seeing when I was there. It's this focus, this calmness, when he makes mistakes, it's, he doesn't act like it's the end of the world. He gets ready for the next drive and gets up there to do it. And people forget how young the guy is too, with, a different offensive line unit than like we've seen in the past. And so I think he's doing a great job. And when we talk about that matchup too, it's like, this is going to be a big one, and I'm interested to hear more thoughts from you on it before I get into it, because I have some cool or interesting thoughts I feel like for this whole passing game versus Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I mean, I will say as far as Bryce Young goes, the when you talk about keeping your composure, there really is not a better test possible than what he did last week. I mean, unless you are completely unable to be rattled at all, you cannot do what he did at the end of that game. It's a incredibly high pressure situation. Nothing had gone well all day. I think probably the vast majority of us in that situation would have pretty much given up hope given how the rest of that game had gone. And Bryce Young goes out there and executes a flawless drive to tie the game, get it to overtime, and then basically plays a near perfect uh, 4 overtime session. I mean, obviously they didn't score in the second overtime, but other than that, um, you can't ask for a more composed performance. And it is interesting that you brought up Jalen Hurts, because it reminded me a little bit of in 2017. Uh, there were multiple games that year where Alabama was kind of in trouble, and that was an injury riddled team, I would say, late in the season. But you go back to that Mississippi State game that year where it was not going well for Alabama. He comes down the field and makes a similar game winning drive late in that game, and then obviously, we saw him do it against LSU earlier in his career as well. A game where the offense really couldn't do anything the whole game, and then Hurts kind of takes it upon himself to win that game. I think, and Matt, you can probably speak to this a little better than me. Every player matters, every unit on the team matters, but quarterback is a guy that the rest of the team can sort of rally around in a different way. And when you have a guy who has a moment like that, you've been on teams where something like that has happened before, where things weren't going well and a quarterback steps up and makes a huge game-winning moment. What does that sort of do to the entire team's confidence, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously it boosts the confidence to a very large amount. When you talk about the quarterback position, a lot of those guys are a leader, and it's not just like they're a leader naturally, whatever it may be. All of them were natural leaders when I was at Alabama, but they kind of have to be a leader. That's the job of the quarterback. And so when you have your guy, your captain, your leader coming over there, rallying up the troops and showing that perseverance and ability to just sustain and keep pushing, even when things are not going well. When they didn't have Alabama's run game, we averaged less than 2 yards per carry against Auburn. And so it's like when those things are going like that and you're going through all of that trouble and you're willing to stay there and stand with your troops, with your guys, it rubs off on all those guys. And it's something that carries on for the rest of the season, because now those guys, like when I was there, you look at that quarterback, and especially remember Jalen Hurts when he came back in. It was a huge spark when we played the SEC championship against Georgia. Things weren't going our way. And just his whole season was kind of like that. Like he was, put second string. He had started the year before, but you look at that and that gives guys morale. Like, it builds the morale because you have a guy who's willing to just stick there, stick it in with you, like stick out there, whatever it is, and keep battling with you guys. It rubs off on all the players and can be really powerful for a team.
So I want to talk to you about the sort of your initial note that you wanted to talk about here was the whole passing game really for Alabama and how they'll do against Georgia's passing defense. I think we all know at this point that we feel pretty good about Bryce Young and what he's capable of doing and his composure. But let's talk about kind of the rest of that group as a whole, because I think if Alabama's going to win this game today, they're going to have a big day through the air. They're very banged up at running back. We all know that this is not the best offensive line that they've had under Nick Saban. Not to say there's no place for a running game today, but I think it's probably safe to say Alabama's going to need to do a lot of work through the air today if they want to win this game. What do you think overall of this passing attack from the receivers to the tight ends, the kind of the whole way that it's operated this year?
Yeah.
This, by the way, I should say this is your specialty. You're a wide receiver by training, by trade. So your opinion here is very qualified.
Yeah. This season, one thing I've seen that I don't necessarily love is there have been some drops. I've not seen it I feel like there's been more drops this season than most. And so, guys dropping passes in crucial games. And it stinks, but it's the reality. And that's something that I've seen like a couple times this year that I hope that they've improved on for this game. And then I also love Jameson Williams. I love that upgrade. He's an unbelievable player, spark plug. I don't see a lot of people, throughout my time at Alabama, it's like there's not a lot of people who remind me of him. He's got this kind of energy, almost like a defensive player energy. Kind of reminds me of like a Ronnie Harrison, vibe, but on offense. But the unit looks solid overall. And I think going into this game, a quick little shout out to Giles Amos, who was a former tight end at Alabama. But I talked to him about it, and we were talking about the passing game. And he made a really good point. He's saying, Mechie's been kind of quiet recently, and Jameson Williams has been getting all the hype. And you got people like Mechie and Slade who they're going to need to step up. And I think that this game will be a perfect opportunity. Georgia's going to be game planning to stop Jameson Williams. And so guys like Mechie, Slade, JoJo Earl, people coming in there are going to have an opportunity to make a big impact. And I hope they will. And then I hope that we utilize the tight ends a little bit more. I feel like every game that we have utilized them in the passing game has worked out really well.
And look, they maybe not utilized for a lot of the game last week, but in some very crucial situations, those tight ends came up big in the Iron Bowl. And maybe one of the biggest plays of the game was Bryce Young completing that pass on 4th and whatever it was. It might have been 4th and 9, I think, on that final drive. I mean, you that was I think shows that clearly they're still a part of the plan.
Yes, and I think they almost do that I remember always thinking like, why is OJ Howard not being utilized more?
Yeah.
It always drove me nuts, but I think they kind of do it as a thing to have just in the playbook to be able to be like a game like this when you need to pull it out. Like I remember our Darius Stewart's pass to OJ Howard in the national championship games, kind of like we needed something. And no one's seen that before. So I think we kind of keep a lot of that hidden. And so hopefully we'll see him utilize that some more today.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely be there with our whole AL.com crew today at the SEC championship game. Mac and I will be back post game to break down whatever happens with you guys, win or lose, and we'll give you our analysis. But Mac, thank you for joining us today. And before I let you go, do you have a feel about this game right now? Where's your head at? I think heading into this game, how do you see this thing going right now?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of things. One is I'm extremely excited. I know everyone's really excited for this game, but I really like this team. Like I said it the other day, I put out a tweet or something, but it's constant. Like every year, it's just almost like Alabama steamrolls. Last year, they dominated. This is the year they've been tested. And the last game made me just fall in love with this team because in the same sense where you're talking about Bryce Young not giving up and coming up with that drive at the end of the game there, and then a couple of amazing plays. That's kind of the whole just personality of that team. It's like a group of guys that they've had injuries, they battle with injuries, they battle with other things and changes, different coaches coming in, and they've been able to adapt. And just seeing them have battle that adversity makes me really like them because they're that underdog. And so I'm excited to see them. I think a lot of people are counting them out, and I really think that Alabama is going to shock some people in this game. And I think they're going to win, so we're all excited to that.
He's calling it.
I said it here first.
All right. We'll see. We'll see if Mac's prediction is right. As I said, we will be back post game to talk with you guys on the Alabama post game show, which is also brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. So once again, Matt, thank you for joining us this morning. Thanks to all the fans dropping in the comments this morning. A ton of you out there excited to see this game. One more, and then we're heading to postseason. We'll see how good and how exciting of a postseason it will be after today's events play out. So thanks everybody once again. For Matt Hereford, I am Matt Scalisi, and thank you guys for watching the Alabama pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. We will see you guys tonight.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.